I would like to welcome you, Sarfraz. I already saw your video. Oh, great.
Hi there. Hi.
It's good to see you, and nice to meet you too.
Yeah, nice to talk to you as well. And hello to everybody who's watching as well.
Yes. So, and actually, I'm really curious, and I would really like to ask you a question about the images you see there, because it's so rare to have the occasion to ask a protagonist of a novel and also the author about things that you make, that you think about as a teacher and also as a student.
Sure.
And so there is this exercise, or this question about which metaphor, which image do you prefer for multicultural societies? And I would just like to ask you, if you're willing to answer the question, do you have a metaphor, an image that you prefer? And if yes, which one?
So tell me what are these images showing?
Can you see the images?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, well, you have, first of all, the salad bowl.
Yeah.
Then 2 puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
A mosaic with like stones.
Yeah.
And you have the melting pot in the middle.
Yeah.
Then a patchwork out of cloth. And you have paint mixing into each other. Right.
Yeah. Well,
and spices.
Okay. What's the brown? What's that coffee or what is that?
I think it's different spices. Maybe curry. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, I think people talk about the melting pot, as that's a common metaphor that they use. I don't think it's actually the one that I would use. I think in an ideal world, maybe is it the salad? Whatever that thing is at the top left-hand side, number 1.
Yes, that is a salad. Yeah.
I think I would choose that because what that shows is that each thing is in its own way distinctive. It brings its own abilities, qualities, tastes, flavors, but together it can create something that's bigger than its own single part and also be part of a unified larger, as well as having its own integrity as its own thing as well. And so I think that's the thing to shoot for, because what you don't want to do is lose everything that is part of your essence, because that I think is dilution, it's erasure, and I don't think it's healthy. But at the same time, you don't want to just be a patchwork, you don't want to just be a mosaic, because the danger of those is that you're not really in deep contact with anybody else, and it's more of a pieces of a jigsaw rather than mixing together more.
Okay, thank you very much for answering that. It's really interesting to get your insight and your perspective.
That's okay. So have you got any other things you'd like to ask about, or?
I'm sure there have been lots of questions already in the chat, and maybe I would like to say hello to Debbie Boom as well. Hello, Debbie.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Yay. Brilliant. Thanks for joining us. I'm the editor.
Hi.
The other group picked up on that at the beginning. And I have the honor of pestering you with all our questions that have been posted in the chat and might continue to be posted. We've been in touch before, haven't we? And we've told you that the main topics are sort of that the kids that are reading your book in Lower Saxony, that's thousands of kids. And you were initially quite surprised by that, I think.
Mystified.
And the main topics they have to look at in this context is growing up, ethnic identity, and then Britishness and multicultural Britain. And Jana was showing how she'd sort of stuck all of that into the teacher's guide. And I think our listeners would really hear in your own words, like to hear your reaction to, wow, a bunch of German students have to read my memoir.
Yeah, I sort of think, haven't they suffered enough? But no, I mean, I think, to be honest, it's kind of an interesting thing, because What I think it says to me is that in creating something, if you are absolutely, completely personal and completely uniquely specific to your unique experience, and don't actually think too much about who's reading it, but you're kind of doing it for yourself, and you're trying to tell as true and honest and as detailed a story about your own life or whatever the thing is. The fascinating thing is that it actually finds an audience that's larger than you might assume. And so the interesting thing I find about the book is filled with very specific details about the town I grew up in, the time I grew up in, the community I grew up in. And yet I'll meet people from all over the world who somehow connect with it. And that's even more true actually with the film, with Blinded by the Light, where you find that, and I would be thinking, you've never been to Luton. Why on earth would you be interested? Or you don't know anybody who's from this background. Why are you interested? And I think the lesson is that actually the story that I'm writing, you know, I know you're focusing on the multiculturalism, and I get that. And I know you're focusing on the Britishness, and those are factors. When I read that book now, because I had to read it again to do the audio book for it last year. And what I really read about it was actually about a guy who was in his early to mid 30s, which is when I wrote it, who was grieving about the loss of his dad. Mm-hmm. And it's really, if you read it again, it's actually mostly about my father and his death and trying to work out who was this person and how can I have a conversation with him when he's no longer around. And I was really struck by how much grief and processing there was in that book. And so multiculturalism and Britishness and identity are part of that, because my dad came from a particular country. He came to Britain. I was obviously a different generation, and I was trying to work out who I was in relation to him. And identity and cultural heritage are part of that. But actually, it's about parents and children. It's about how do you make your parents proud without completely being subservient to every one of their aims and wishes? You know, how can you still follow your dreams without totally breaking their hearts? And for me, those are the things that come through. And I think that if anyone reads the book and connects to it, that's probably what they're actually going to connect with, whether they know it or not, rather than the specific stuff to do with the Muslim and the Pakistani and stuff, which is interesting. And they learn what it's like to feel like you're a bit different from other people. But most people don't read books because they necessarily want to peer into the world of Pakistani Muslims in Luton. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think that's going to be that reason why they connect. I think it's going to be because they see more universal themes told through a very specific lens.
Absolutely, I can fully relate to that. And to be honest, when I read the book, I thought, we have very, very different backgrounds, but there's a lot of similarities there. And I felt you in this. But having said that, of course, you're quite active on social media, and so are our students that will be reading this book. So you might find yourself contacted by a number of German kids who want to let you know what they think about this book.
Well, as long as they don't want me to, as long as they don't want me to write their essays for them.
I don't think they'd go that far, but the teachers listening might have to comment on that and tell us in the chat whether their students would go that far.
Because, you know, it has been taught in other parts of Germany, and I do sometimes get people direct messaging me on Instagram saying, you know, I've been asked to write something. Would you, it'd be great to get your thoughts on it. And I was just like, this sort of feels slightly like cheating to contact me. But no, I mean, it's always, what I find really interesting also is generationally kind of interesting, because that's one of the things that I find quite surprising, is that a story that's set before all the people who are reading it were born, it should really feel like a historic book in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like a period book. And maybe it does, to be honest. Say that again.
It felt like time travel.
Yeah, because it's a world before the internet, before mobile phones, and so many of the things we take for granted aren't there. And so that's, I think, quite interesting as to what somebody who is, of the generation who's reading it, what they make of a world where you don't have a phone in your pocket, and those kind of things, and also how much smaller the world feels now compared to then, because the very act of what we're doing now, talking on screen to people in Germany, that was Star Trek. That was not something that happened when I was a kid. And so I find that interesting about a world where the people who are growing up now, there's so much of the things they take for granted, which would seem miraculous to the teenage me,
Yeah,
and so that
absolutely.
must be quite interesting for them to read that as well.
Yeah. Now, I know you say for you mainly going back, it's dealing with your grief and maybe trying to build a relationship with the father that is no longer there. And that probably reflects back down to your next generation, to your kids. How are they in music? How are they and you, if you had to compare them? Or is that too personal?
No, I mean, the thing I find, they're watching TV right now. I'm hoping they're not going to interrupt me. But the thing I find that's interesting is, the world that you grow up in shapes the potential you have to some extent, So I grew up in a world without books, really. If you read the book, basically the books I got were from the library, or they were from very sort of, jumble sales, which are like, secondhand places where I could buy things. But we didn't actually have any books we owned in the house at all. Whereas, my house now is absolutely filled with books. There's books on that side and there's books on that side. And this is just my study, and there's loads downstairs. And so my children are growing up in a world where knowledge and ideas are things to esteem. And they're also growing up with the idea of potential and aspirations being just immeasurably larger. So my daughter writes poems, and it's kind of embarrassing because I kept a diary from when I was a kid, and her poems are just in another league compared to the stuff that I write. I used to write. My stuff was just like completely kind of doggerel rhymes compared to the stuff that she comes out with, but it's just because she's starting from further ahead. Do you know what I mean?
I know, yeah. Brilliant. Yeah.
So it's partly that, and I think but the other thing that's interesting is that some of the things that are the foundational things that are in the book, in a way, which are kind of an oppositional relationship to my parents, that's not really there. Like I kicked against my parents because my dad was very strict and my mum didn't really have much power, and I was just told what to do, and I kind of believed, well, I had to do what I did, because there was no idea of arguing against them. And that is just not the relationship that my children have with me at all. So I find it really interesting about the pendulum swing that, if you have a father who shouted at you a lot, who kind of scared you a lot, and who never ever kind of hugged you or showed any physical affection, then you sort of know that you realize that's not the kind of person you want to be if you've got kids. So you kind of go the other way in a way, So I am very affectionate, but then my children have absolutely no respect for me whatsoever. And so it's just like, I'm not saying my situation's better than my dad's situation. It's just the pendulum swings.
Yeah.
What is quite nice is that, one of the things that happened, because when my dad died when I was 23, and he never left much evidence of himself. There are no letters, and there's very little of him. And I know that that's partly why I've written so much, newspaper articles and also this book, because I sort of want to be able to kind of give a flavor of who I am to my children in a way that my dad wasn't able to, with me. And so, my daughter is 11. She hasn't read the book, but she has seen the film. And it was a very, very emotional experience for her, because she said, it's almost like I'm getting a chance to meet my granddad,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so I think I feel really privileged that I was able to write it down, not least because I sometimes look back at that book, Greetings from Borough Park, and there are things that I don't remember remembering, if you know what I mean, because it was written a while back. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I wrote these stories down because I don't remember them now. So I learn new things if I ever go back to it myself as well.
That absolutely lovely. And also it's a wonderful way of honoring your parents too. I mean, it's not just your dad, it's your mum too that you honor in this book. And it's a nice, it's a loving and respectful way and honest way of, you know, keeping a memory alive. And that too is something we can teach our kids, I think, and our students, that, you know, we want to honor the generation before us and leave something for the generation that comes after us too, maybe.
And I think the other thing is that you're absolutely right. But the other thing I wanted to do is that, you know, who are the people who get written about? Who are the people that are honored? It tends to be not first generation migrants, you know. No. So I often say, I used to say that, you know, if you were walking down the street, not you particularly, but like, you know, maybe the kids that the teachers are teaching, right? And they were to see an older Pakistani woman in traditional clothes walking towards them, what would they think? What would be their first impression? It would probably be, this is a woman who speaks another language, is from a different world, probably has nothing to do with me, you know? Not necessarily a bad opinion, but just an opinion of otherness. This is somebody else, you know? But then if I told you, well, this person, you know, got married to a husband who then left to go to another country and had to raise their 3 children for 10 years on their own. And then they came to a foreign country and they worked until 1 a.m. making dresses so that their children could have food and could get educated. And they sacrificed everything of themselves to make sure that their children had opportunities that they wouldn't be able, that they never had. Suddenly that person becomes a human being, you know, sometimes becomes a person who's loving and sacrificial, and they're not just sort of a label, and they're not just a skin color, and they're not just a religion, and they're not just a costume, but they become a real person. And I wanted to try and do that with the book, as I wanted to kind of let people, you know, hold their hands and take them into a house and a family that they might not ordinarily get a chance to meet or visit, but to sort of make them seem like they were humans rather than just labels. And so that's why it's so intimate. It's a chance for you to kind of really get to know people, in my case, my family. And I think that that's something which really means something to me, because my dad lived and died in complete anonymity. You know, my mum now is like 89 and has dementia and doesn't, you know, she's physically okay, but mentally she's not that great. And I just sort of feel like that generation of people, these parents who came and did so much for their children, and they put up with so much discrimination, and they put up with so much hostility, and they put up with having to do jobs that were well beneath them, you know, to be able to sort of remember the sacrifices they made, and not just to honor them, but to immortalize them, so that random people around the world who would never normally know anything about that world, for a moment while they're reading that book, are thinking about them. You know, that's not a bad thing to have done.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And to return again to, I mean, this slide that's still up, I mean, these are the people we wouldn't normally meet. We catch a glimpse of, a very intimate glimpse of them. And they all contribute to what makes up Britain or Britishness today. And yeah, I was wondering how you would say maybe your perception of Britishness, if you can say that even, has changed over the years.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, when I was younger, I really resisted the idea of Britishness, because it just never felt like something that I was invited to or part of, you know? I kind of felt like it doesn't apply to people like me. I don't get the same chances as other people. I'm not treated the same. I won't have the same opportunities as other people. So what am I feeling proud of? Why should I feel proud to be British when it doesn't seem to be like I am invited to the same? I'm not sitting at the table with everybody else, you know? So that was what I felt like as a teenager a lot of the time, and because that was true. That was genuinely true. If you come from that class and that background, you don't get to have those same opportunities. And then when that started changing, I think, is when I started to actually get a chance to use my voice. Because when I started being able to use my voice in writing newspaper or radio stuff or this book or other things, I thought, well, what I'm actually doing is I'm actually adding to the definition of Britishness. Because whatever the Britishness was when I was 16 is different, because now I am getting a chance to add my story to it. And not just me, but other people who are, who are not from the same kind of traditional, narrow kind of background. And so then I started feeling more confident about saying I'm British, because I said, I am British, and I am part of one of those people that's actually broadening and deepening that very definition. So it actually does include me. And so if anyone says to me now, that question people talk about, people often say, oh, I'm always asked, where are you from? And then they say, where are you really from? I have no problem with that. I just say, yes, my parents are from Pakistan. I came to Britain when I was nearly 3 years old. And, that's what it is. I don't feel defensive about that. I mean, what they're saying is, what version of British are you? Or how do you explain that you speak a certain way, but your skin color is another way, or whatever? And I feel confident and comfortable enough now in who I am, where I am, how I fit in, that I don't mind answering those questions without feeling insecure or without feeling stressed or annoyed. It's just like, yep, that's my journey towards Britishness. Do you know what I mean? It's as valid as somebody else's. It's just a different one. And that journey started, in a place thousands of miles away, but ended here. And continues here. So I think that's what I think for me is a story of it's a journey. It started from feeling not very much like it belonged to me, to now feeling, well, I'm actually contributing, and I have contributed for a few decades now. So I think I've got as much a right as for anyone else to sort of to say, to state and to stress my British identity.
Okay, I like the whole idea of a journey. That's a lovely picture of who I am and where I am. And I now have to go back to sort of more recent events that have happened in the UK.
Yeah.
In that, obviously, last week, massively, Queen Elizabeth funeral, that whole event bringing out people from all walks of life to be a part of something very big. How do you feel that contributes to shaping this whole notion of Britishness?
Well, I mean, I think the Queen, it's an interesting one because the Queen had been around for so long, for most of the lives of most of the people in the country, that in a changing country, in a changing world, she was an anchor. Or a North Star that you could say, okay, everything else changed, but at least she stays the same. And it was a symbol of something that could help bind us all together. And so when I found out that she died, I was genuinely upset. And I was out of the country during the week of the queue and everything. But I think if I hadn't been, I think I might have joined the queue and wanted to sort of experience that myself as well. But what I think is interesting is that it's possible to have two thoughts at the same time. So I think it's completely possible to say that the Queen, reinforced and reminded us of what we've got in common as a British identity, and to say 7 decades of service is a really admirable thing. But then also to say that the royal family are symbols of a slightly more uncomfortable history. Her crown's full of jewels that she stole from my ancestral home, and most of the something like $42 trillion worth of assets were looted from India. So you can both admire a person, but then also say that they're part of a system which ransacked and looted you know, where my family come from originally, and that the empire was a deeply problematic thing. And I think it's possible to feel both those things. And I feel like we need to have a conversation about that, but that doesn't mean that we can't also admire the person, and we can't also admire the fact that she was so respected that hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people gave up, you know, their days to queue up to pay respects to her. I think it's possible to think both of those things at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now we'll jump from there back to a question that has also been put in the chat at some point. Now, music plays a big role, where, you know, Springsteen's songs or lyrics generally seem to have words for what you were feeling as a teenager before you had the words yourself, maybe. What's it like for your kids? Are they into music?
Yeah,
do they share that?
You know, no, they are. I mean, my kids are actually really into Springsteen, funnily enough. My daughter more than my little boy. But yeah, my daughter's really like properly. I mean, it's a very, very lovely thing where there has been times when I've been here in the study, and then I will hear, you know, Born to Run, the album, or Letter to You, a more recent album, coming out of her bedroom. And I'll be like, and I'll go downstairs and say, what are you listening to? And she's listening to that. And I'll say, why are you listening to that? I'm not even here. And she's like, I chose to listen to it. I wanted to listen to it. And so, yeah, that's really nice. And I think that, you know, I mean, they've kind of grown up with it as soon as they were, you know, as soon as they were born. So they were listening to it, but then they like their own music as well. And the thing about what's quite interesting though is that the way that music works now obviously is different from how it worked when I was young. So because of the way that people consume music online, they don't really see any distance between, you know, a music that was released this week and something that was released 40 years ago. So yeah, my daughter's quite quirky though. I remember she'll just say random questions to me. I remember I think she was about 4 years old or something. I remember 4 or 5, and we were just having a cup of tea together or something. And she said, "Dad, what's your favorite Chuck Berry song?" And I was just like, so she sort of absorbs all the things that I am listening to, and comes back to me with them. But she's really got very, very good music taste. And I think part of it is that today's kids are actually able to access music from all the decades in a way that, you know, I wasn't able to. But I don't think music means as much to them as it did to me. I mean, when I was, maybe not so much 10, but when I was 11, 12, 13, it was like it was a window to another world. This is even before Springsteen. It was something I used as a way of escaping from my everyday life. It was something which gave me, it made me happy. It gave me ideas. I don't think it does that for these kids, but then they don't need it because they're not struggling in the same way that I was.
And probably they also have many, many different other ways of escapism at their fingertips.
Yeah, but actually we're pretty good on that because they don't play computer games. They're not like typical kids. They go to Steiner school for one thing, which is a very German thing, isn't it? And so they don't have technology as much as some of their friends might. So they actually lose them. Well, my daughter loses herself in books more than she loses herself in anything else.
Can I just ask a question here? Somebody asked in the chat, whose idea was the film, and what do you think of it now after a few years?
It was my idea, but it's never one person's idea. It was a dream. It was my dream. And then it became something that you kind of work towards to try and make it happen. But originally, when I wrote the book, even when I was writing the book, I was thinking this would make an amazing film if we could make it happen. And what do I think of it? Well, I wrote the script. I was there the whole time during the making of it and development of it. So it was never a surprise during the whole time. I think what I like about it is that it's being somebody who's watching it somewhere around the world for the first time, nearly every day. And so I get messages from all over the world from people who've just seen it. Wow. And that's something nice because you know that something comes out and you know that there'll be attention in the week or the month it comes out. But what you don't realize with film is that just because that's when it came out, that's not when everybody discovers it. And so that's something sweet. So every couple of days, somebody will land on my inbox somewhere to say, I've just watched this film and I've just tracked you down. And, and the other thing I love is that people talk about how they watch it with their kids, and it's something which the generations like. So I was talking, in fact, I was at a book festival in just at this weekend, and this guy, and he was like, my daughter's 15 and my son's 18, and we have nothing in common, but we all love your film, and that's one of the things that brings us all together. And that's quite sweet, when because there aren't that many things that generations do together. So the idea that a film is something that teenagers are watching with their parents and both are enjoying is pretty cool.
Right, that is lovely. And would you say you prefer the film to the book, or do you prefer the book? Because you said the book also has sort of...
I don't have a preference. I mean, they're just two different things, Yeah. If you want the truth, you read the book. If you want my unvarnished voice off that time, it's the book. If you want something which feels more feel good, and you want something which feels a bit more joyous, and you want something which feels a bit more colorful and a bit more escapist, than the film. So it's not, you don't have to choose. They're just one is a product of commerce and compromise, but is for a big screen, and so you make compromises to do that. And the other is a much more smaller, more honest, more nuanced thing. It's a more truer account, but that doesn't necessarily make it better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we all profited very much, I think, from reading the book and or watching the film. I'm wondering, are there more questions in the audience? It's been quite quiet in the chat.
I think we sort of asked everything on most of the questions you posted earlier on.
Yeah.
So if there's still something you would like to know from Sarfraz, you can write in the chat now.
Has the teacher have they started teaching the book already now? Then
some or are about to start. So they're
and for how long is it? Is it for a couple of weeks? Is it for how long do they do it for?
Well, that depends actually if on the class you teach. So there are some who do it for A levels, and then it's definitely a couple of weeks and a longer period of time. But there were also a lot of people who were just interested in your book and in the topic. So
okay. And then am I right in saying that you change it after every year? So it happens this year and then it doesn't happen next year? Is that
right? In Lower Saxony, it's usually every 2 years that the topics are and the set texts are changed. But then Germany being Germany and a federal system, it might crop up in another area, and it might also just be, it's a relevant topic in terms of Britishness, identity, growing up. These are topics that are always somehow relevant to A-level students and exams. So it might be read elsewhere.
Because one of the things I was saying was, I think we talked about this when it was a bit more of a lockdown situation, but if it was possible, it would be really fun to kind of go over and do a live event or something and meet some of the students who are reading it, because I've done that up in another part of Germany a couple of years ago, and it's quite fun to sort of, I think they just went into a school hall, and a couple of hundred people come in who are all reading the book come, and you can get a chance to talk to them directly. And I sometimes sort of do a thing where I show the photographs of my family and some of the real characters and things like that. And it's always quite fun to sort of see people face to face, if you know what I mean, who've been doing it or whatever. But I don't know. I just thought if it was carrying on to be taught next year or something, maybe that's something that one could think about.
Well, some people will really like that idea. So I think the schools that would like to host that could contact you, couldn't they, Sarfraz?
Yeah. Or directly or through you or whatever. But yeah.
Great to know.
I'll pass it on.
Definitely.
Is there anything else, Sarfraz, that you would like to ask the teachers you might be interested in?
No, they've all gone completely dead since I've been looking at this thing, so I don't know if they're still actually here.
Sorry?
Are they actually around? Maybe they're just claiming to be there, but nobody's actually listening anymore.
No.
Somebody said they're enjoying the show or enjoying the interview. something about how do I get Christian Bruns?
Oh, I think
what language is that? Is that half English, half German?
No, I think that's autocorrect on
Okay.
a device. That is like something I might send off.
Okay, I thought it was some sort of mutated version of German or something. I don't know.
Would like to invite you to a virtual event in lessons. You know.
Yeah, I'm up for that. I mean, basically, another thing I've sometimes done is that the only problem is students can tend to be a bit nervous, but you know, if you do something where they're primed to ask a question or two questions each, and then they can get a chance to ask it, and we can have a conversation. The only problem is they often get a little bit nervy when they're doing it in that kind of way, because you're sort of speaking to a void a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's just I always find, because I think the interesting thing about this is when you have an exchange of thoughts. So it's like, you know, it's all very well me talking about the things, but it's interesting to know what it feels like for them to be to be who they are and how they see the world, and whether they find it, you know, are any of the battles that I'm talking about in it have any relevance, or do they feel that those battles have been won, or do they feel like the world is now a kinder, more tolerant place than the one that I'm describing? You know, those things are kind of quite interesting, I think, as well.
Would you like, Sarfraz, would you like to post your contact details in the chat for anybody who would, you know, like you to come over or do a video conference or whatever else?
Absolutely not. But you can, but they can contact you,
right?
And we can sort of do it through that.
Okay.
And the next thing I'll know is people start sending me copies of their manuscripts of their novels that they want me to read. So.
Oh yeah. We've got them all lined up, Sarfraz. They're all waiting here for you to go through and turn into films. And
but no, I mean, it's not. I can't do everything, but I just feel like if there must be a way to sort of do it in such a way that it feels, you know, you can get a lot of bang for your buck, if you know what I mean. You know, you just sort of do it over 2 days or something, and you see a lot of people or something like that. I think that could be quite fun.
Okay, great. So I'll pass it on to you, shall I?
We'll try and work something out. I think we could really have a very fun session somewhere.
What kind of ages are they, that the students that you're reading? They're reading?
17.
Okay.
18, yeah.
17, 18.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that could be fun, quite fun. I mean, the other thing I was going to say is that I've got, you know, I did a follow-up book which has just come out just last year called "They: What Muslims and Non-Muslims Get Wrong About Each Other," and in a way it's different, but in a way it's the same. It's sort of, it's some of it is partly a sequel, sort of catching up on what's happened since the end of the last book, but it's also sort of asking, you know, those questions that you've been talking about. It's sort of trying to chart what the answers are over time, you know. So it's just it's kind of interesting, because I feel like one of the things that there's a danger of is thinking this is what I thought the world was like or Britain was like when I was this age, and that's the answer forever. But actually, if the country or the world changes, you have to kind of reflect that in your worldview. You can't fight battles which have been won completely. You know, there are new battles to be won, but you can't just think the world's completely the same, because it just isn't.
No.
So I think that's one thing I'm really aware of, you know, in terms of not just thinking everything's exactly the same as it was. In some ways, it's so much better, and there's a danger of not accepting that stuff as well, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Well,
so if there's no one else has anything to say, then I think are we okay? Are we done?
I think we'd just like to say how chuffed we are that you could join us tonight, and I think
thank you for inviting me and asking me to join your little thing, and I hope that I hope I didn't completely contradict your various slides and show your
completely. You went off the block. It's completely, now we have to rewrite it now.
No, thanks a lot for joining us, Sarfraz.
No, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice evening.
Good luck in teaching the book, and I hope the kids find some entertainment out of it. Take care.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.